I am here to review Stone Ocean. That's right, I, All Might, am taking over the Stone Ocean reviews for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, the fool woke up with a fire axe lodged in his head. Ever since young Midoriya was killed by young Tokoyami, everything has been going wrong. Young Tokoyami was himself killed, and suspicions are growing tremendously. Funko Pops have been going missing left and right. The fool's room was ransacked, and now the fool himself wakes up injured. I feel terrible. I feel like I should be doing more, but I just don't know what to do. My powers are so limited, and I trust the security detail. I don't want to undermine their authority, but things keep going wrong, and you just have to start asking questions. But I feel like at the very least, if I really want to help, I can at least cover for the fool with this Stone Ocean review. So let's get right into it. So today we're covering chapters 85 to 95. They begin with Foo Fighters versus Pucci. We get an explanation of what drives Foo Fighters. She believes that memories are what drive humans, and they give meaning to life. She's formed memories with Jolene, so now she cares about her. She wants to help her. So Pucci and Foo Fighters are fighting. Foo Fighters is aiming a gun at DNG. Pucci doesn't want Foo Fighters to kill DNG, so he attacks with Whitesnake, nearly knocking out Foo Fighters' disc. But Foo Fighters uses her Foo Fighters gun and drops some plankton onto DNG, killing him. So Foo Fighters manages to leave the area as a plankton, and she goes towards this water faucet that's nearby, but Pucci has added a disc that instantly boils water, so when she tries to use the water, it boils her and damages her tremendously. Fortunately, she had hidden away a walkie-talkie and was actually communicating with Weather Report, asking him to come save her, and he listened, and so now Weather Report is making rain happen, and now she has pure water to save her. She also used Morse code to communicate with Weather Report, telling him that Father Pucci is Whitesnake. Weather Report also created some fog, which allowed Foo Fighters to escape, so now Foo Fighters and Weather Report are going towards Jolene and Anasui. Meanwhile, Jolene and Anasui are on an island in the nearby marsh, and the baby has hatched from its egg. So Jolene and Anasui pursue the baby, but every time they get close to it, they shrink. And as they shrink, their speed also decreases, so they really can never reach the baby. And eventually, Jolene gets the idea to hop on top of a leaf and jump onto the baby. Maybe this will help. But this idea backfires because even as she's falling, her speed is constantly being decreased, and so she's never able to reach the baby, until suddenly the baby's stand appears and attacks Jolene, attacking her string and chewing on it, and eventually the stand actually grabs onto Jolene and starts shriveling her up. Jolene deduces that the stand must be the singularity point. That is the point that she is eventually going to reach as she gets closer to the baby, and eventually she'll get so small that she'll disappear. But fortunately, Anasui had a plan. Noticed that even though Jolene was shrinking, the baby had become attracted to her shoe, and it was touching it, and the shoe retained its normal size. So whatever the baby touches and becomes interested in is not affected by the baby's shrinking stand. So Anasui had tossed a bottle at the baby, and the baby had become interested in the bottle, so the bottle remained its normal size. So Anasui and Jolene ran into the bottle, luring the stand, which was also shrinking, into it, and they trapped the stand in the bottle. Anasui and Jolene escaped and had to dive her down, put the bottle cap back onto the bottle. Then Jolene and Anasui are suddenly back in their normal size because the baby took an interest to them and started poking them. Then suddenly two figures appear, and it seems threatening at first, but then they see it's actually Foo Fighters and Weather Report. And they're all catching up. Weather Report hugs Jolene. Anasui becomes very jealous. But then suddenly, Weather Report attacks. It wasn't Weather Report at all. It was actually a Whitesnake in disguise. It attacks Foo Fighters, knocking out her disc, and absolutely destroys poor Anasui, nearly killing him. Jolene's arm is even taken off, but she uses her string to put it back in place. So now there's a brawl between Jolene and Pucci. Pucci attacks her, but Jolene creates handcuffs out of string, tying the two of them together, because she doesn't want Pucci to reach the green baby. But then Pucci swipes at her, and he had hidden a cross underneath his nail. He nearly knocks out the disc in her head after doing this. But Jolene instinctively knows where to hit him, even though she's been blinded by the disc, and she's very formidable in battle. But eventually, Pucci takes out Jotaro's memory disc and tosses it into the dying Anasui. Now, while the Jotaro memory disc may be okay, if it goes into a dying person and that person dies, the disc will die along with that person. So now Jolene has to make a choice. Will she let Pucci go and go after the Jotaro disc, or will she keep fighting Pucci? Eventually she decides to let Poochie go, and Poochie finds the green baby. And then Poochie gives the green baby one of his bones. Then the baby starts consuming Poochie's arm, and then it takes it away into the grass. But Jolene is fighting for her life, getting that Jotaro disc from the dying Anasui, but she can't, and now she's all alone, and it's terrible. But then the dying Anasui uses Diver Down to communicate with the remains of Foo Fighters, telling Foo Fighters to go into his body and use the moisture to get the Jotaro disc out for Jolene, even if it means that he will die, that Anasui will die. Eventually, Foo Fighters does go into the body, but she doesn't do exactly as she's asked. She uses her moisture and her intellect to heal Anasui, and she returns the Jotaro disc. And then we see the golden wind of Foo Fighters come out of Anasui, and it's tragic. And Jolene mentions that she could use the Foo Fighter disc, put it back into the plankton, and maybe bring Foo Fighters back. But Foo Fighters says that even if this happens, it will not be the Foo Fighters we all know and love. It will be a new Foo Fighters, not the same. So it seems like, unfortunately, Foo Fighters has passed on. We even saw her golden wind. So that is very sad. So this arc was incredibly tense, and there were lots of neat ideas covered. Like I said in the beginning, it covers what drove Foo Fighters. Once again, we know that Foo Fighters values her intellect strongly, and she's starting to form her own opinions about humanity, thinking that it's memories that bring people closer together, and that drive people to love each other. The memories that we form with people are what make us love them. So the memories she has with Jolene are the reason why she wants to save Jolene so badly. And we also see the relationship between Anasui and Foo Fighters, and how Anasui is always bullying Foo Fighters, unfortunately. Anasui only wants Jolene. He considers Foo Fighters to be nothing more than plankton. There's even a point where Anasui says that they should kill the green baby, because there's no way it's going to be an ally, and it's not even human. And Foo Fighters takes extreme offense to that, because she's not human either. So does Anasui just want to dispose of her as well? But then all of this sort of culminates when Foo Fighters makes the ultimate sacrifice to use her moisture and intellect to save Anasui, for Jolene's sake, and for Anasui's sake probably too. And it really shows a complete character arc for Foo Fighters. She started out as just a plankton stand that was obeying Whitesnake's orders, and this was nothing for her. It's even stated at the beginning of the chapter that Foo Fighters can barely even remember what happened during these days. But when she started to be more human and interact with Jolene and her friends, she started to form memories, and she started to care about them, so much so that she's even willing to sacrifice herself for people that don't even like her. And it really shows just how human and incredible and intellectual and smart she's become, and it really shows just how impressive of a new species she really was, and it was really great to see. Now this sort of goes for Anasui as well. He's sort of unlikable in the sense that he's always bullying Foo Fighters. Now, the feelings he has for Jolene are cute, but the way he treats Foo Fighters is just unacceptable. But then again, we also saw him prepared to sacrifice himself for Jolene's sake. He asked Foo Fighters to go into his body and use the moisture to get the disc, even if it meant him dying. And this shows us how much he actually does care for people. And deep down, he probably cared for Foo Fighters as well, even if he didn't show it. So all these characters are all very human and very interesting, and it's very nice to see. And then there's Poochie. Throughout these chapters, we also saw a flashback between Poochie and Dio, where Dio asks Poochie, "Why don't you just take my stand the world and betray me and become the most powerful person ever?" And Poochie says, "Of course I wouldn't do that because I'm loyal to you." And Dio says sorry. And for forgiveness, he gives Poochie one of his bones. So I guess now we understand how the Dio bone actually came into play here, because it was given to Poochie by Dio when Dio was still alive. And also the fight between Poochie and Jolene in this chapter is really interesting, because it's the first time we see the main antagonist actually fighting head on the main protagonist. And it was very cool, and it reminds me of the very end of Diamond is Unbreakable, when Kira and Josuke are fighting, and Kira sees for the first time just how formidable of a fighter Josuke really is. It's a very interesting fight, with lots of interesting combat, and just all the fights in these arcs, the ones between Foo Fighters and Poochie and Jolene, are just very well done and interesting. And I also love the standability of this green baby. It's quite difficult to explain, but they have a nice little diagram of it. Essentially, every time you half the distance between yourself and the baby, your size and your speed are decreased by half. So you have your distance once, then you're decreased by half, both in height and in speed. Then that half is decreased by half again, and then again, and again, and again. And eventually, if you keep infinitely decreasing your height and speed and distance by half, then you're never actually going to reach the baby, because your speed will always be getting decreased. And it's a very interesting concept. There was even a Vsauce video about it that I watched called Super Tasks. It's very interesting. And it was very cool to see, especially with that stand being the singularity point that eventually finds you and shrivels you up and destroys you. And it was a very complex and intricate stand, and it really shows that I guess Araki is very creative when coming up with these abilities, and very educated as well. And there's even a part at the very beginning of these chapters. The very thing you see is a little diagram of all the animals that live in the swamp, and they're all very beautifully drawn, of course, and I guess it just shows that Araki is indeed smart. So overall, I really enjoy these chapters, and I hope the Fool can be back soon to review them, because, well, I like Stone Ocean, but I'm not much of a reviewer myself. But, yeah, I'm going to see what I can do to help with these investigations, because I want to know what's going on with these Funko Pops. So thank you all for watching.